Hi everyone, my name's Deb Marnie and I'm from Aussie Maille, and today in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create our slave to Byzantine bracelet. Alright guys, let's get to it. So this is a sample piece of what your work will look like today, and to complete this tutorial you're going to need the following components. So we're using 16 gauge AWG, which is 1.2mm diameter wire. We're using 4.25mm ID, and you will need approximately 265 of those. Now this is for a bracelet that goes 8 inches, so adjust that as necessary for yourself. We're also using 16 gauge 7.50mm rings. We need 20 of those. We need two 16 gauge 8.5mm ID rings. We'll also need a 8mm Swarovski Rivoli, whatever colour you like of course, a 2-strand slide lock clasp, a piece of manufactured chain. Now the length of this will depend on your hand size, but whatever chain you've got, that will be sufficient. We're also going to need, of course, our pliers. So 2 smooth jawed pliers. I'm using pliers, of course, from our Xuron range, the chisel nose plier and a short nose plier. We're going to start to make this bracelet by creating the Byzantine diamonds, or in this case the Byzantine squares, that go around your wrist. Now to make an 8-inch or 20cm bracelet, you'll need 9 of these units to actually go around the wrist and 1 more to go down along your hand. So I'll just show you how to make one of these. We start off with 4 pieces of a 2-2 chain. So just make up a simple 2-2 chain. I'm just popping 2 rings onto an open ring, feeding another ring through those 2 rings, and then I'm just going to go through and close those rings up. But you make this chain up however works best for you. Like I said, we need 4 pieces of simple 2-2 chain. Then taking out one of your 7.5mm ID rings, pop on those 4 pieces of chain just by going through one of the pairs on each piece of chain. Okay. Once you've got all 4 bits of chain on there, close that up, and we put a second 7.5mm ring through the same path so that we pick up all of those chains again. So we've just doubled up our center, what becomes our center ring. Okay, close your ring up. And now we're going to create 4 half Byzantine sections here. So what you'll need to do is separate out one pair of rings, or one set of rings, fold back those endmost rings like you normally would with Byzantine, so that you're opening up those top rings like that, so we can see this second set of rings, the rings that we actually folded back, sitting there looking at us. And then taking out another opened 4.25mm ring, feed that straight up through those rings that you exposed, close that up, and repeat with a second ring through the same path. Okay. And that gives you a half Byzantine unit coming off your ring. Now you need to do that exact same thing with the other remaining 3 pieces of chain. So again, separate out one piece, flip back those top rings carefully so that You squeeze them against the center ring. That usually forces these top rings apart a little bit so that it exposes those rings that we just flipped back. Taking up another opened ring, feed it through those two rings that were exposed. Close your ring up and repeat with a second ring. Okay, so we just need to make 4 of these little half Byzantine units around our large rings. They can be a little fiddly, but just persevere with them. They're not that difficult to make. Okay, put one ring, we put a second ring in. Okay, so that's 3 Byzantine units we've made up, or half Byzantine units. We're going just to make the last one. So flip back those rings, squeeze them against the center ring so that they pop up there. You can see the space where we're going to feed our next ring. Open that ring up, feed it through those rings there that have been exposed. Just pick up those 2 rings, close it up, and repeat with a second ring. Okay, so there we've got our middle rings with the 4 half Byzantine units coming off. Now what we want to do is we want to actually join these units to each other, and we're going to do this by taking 2 rings from one unit. So these 2 rings here, 1 and 2, and we're going to join them to corresponding rings on the next unit. So this ring here and this ring here. So we do that by just opening up another 4.25mm ring, and we pick up 1, 2 rings on our first unit, and then 1, 2 rings on our second unit. Okay, close that ring up, and we just need to do that all the way around our piece of work. So taking up 1, 2 rings that were remaining on that unit there that we've already joined, and 1, 2 rings on the next unit. Okay, so you can see this unit here that's been completely joined, this one here. You can see it's joined over here and over here, so it separates the Byzantine in half. Okay, so just going around our work, joining all the halves together, making sure you pick up just the 2 rings from each unit. Okay, and final ring in place. So that's the unit as it stands now. So as you can see, you can have it as either a diamond or a square. It's a bit loose for our purposes. You could leave it like this if you were happy to, but if you wanted to tighten it up just a little bit, we're going to now go through and double up all those rings that we placed. Now the reason why I didn't just put a double ring in to start with, because sometimes depending on your material, you actually don't need to go back and put these second rings in. It's tight enough with just 1 ring in there. So I like to put 1 ring in and assess whether or not I need to put any more in after that. Okay, so that's 3 and 1 more. Okay, just through the same path that it took before. 4. Okay, so that's 1 completed square unit. As I said, we need to make up 10 of these units to make the bracelet as per the tutorial. So you can just adjust that as necessary to fit your wrist size, but if you're making it as per the tutorial, you'll need 10 of these units. So go ahead, make these up, and I will meet you back here in a little while. I've already started to join my units together. So I've got so far 8 joined, so I just need to join the last one. So to do that, you just simply take up one of your units, feed a ring through one of the corners, and then take up another unit, or in this case the bracelet, and feed it through one of the rings there, and a pair of rings there in the corner as well. Close it up, repeat with a second ring because we've doubled up all our rings. So keeping with the pattern, feed another ring through the same path. Okay, so far it looks like that. And then we just want to swing this down and join the other corner so that our piece sits as a square. So taking up another opened ring, feeding it through those 2 corners so that the piece sits properly, so that they're all aligned as squares. And of course we want to double that ring up. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so what we need to do now is to put in the square that's in the middle of the bracelet. Now my bracelet happens to have 9 units, so I would just count down to the 5th unit, which is this one here, and I'm going to add the square here as I have with all the others. Now if you do happen to have an even number, so you can't just go to a middle unit, you could consider maybe putting this, going to the middle 2 there, and maybe putting this as a diamond perhaps, and joining it this way so that you know, it still sits in the middle of your hand. So that's just a thought. If you do have an even number in there, you don't have a centerpiece to go to, so you can't really join the square. I mean, you could join it like that, doing 1 on each. If you want to keep the square look, you could do that, or you could do it as a diamond. If you've got, as I said, if you've got even units in there. Because I've got an odd amount, I can just go to the middle square and just simply join this as I have with all the other units. Okay, so just taking up my unit, counting in 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to join it on the 5th one, so I'm going to join it to this corner here. Join it up, put a second ring in. Oops, that's a bit messy. Let's try that again. I'll go through that one first. That's easier. And then through my loose square, my new square. Okay. And then just join the other side, just like that. So the same thing. Might be a bit easier to go through this one here because there's so many rings in there already, and then go into the square that has no rings in it yet. It's just a little bit easier to do it that way. Your mileage may vary. Do whatever works for you. Okay, and one more ring to place. So going into this one here with all the rings in it first, and then swinging around so that we can feed it through the rings on the new unit. Okay, so this is what we've got so far. We've got the piece here that goes around your wrist, and we're starting to work on the bit that goes down your hand. Okay, so next step is to show you how to make the Byzantine star that goes off this piece here. The construction to make the star is very similar to making the diamond or the square. This time though we need 5 pieces of 2-2 chain created. So I've got 4 made up. I'm just going to finish making up the 5th one. So to do that I'm just taking 2 rings, I haven't opened or closed them, popping them on an opened ring, closing that ring up, feeding through a second open ring through those 2 rings. So I've got the 2-2 chain or 2 in 2 chain, and now I'm just going to go back and finish closing up those rings that I popped on. You can of course pre-close these rings if that's the way you like to weave. I find it's just as easy to pop the rings on straight out of the bag and then close them up as you need them. Okay, so like in the square, we're going to take up this time the 8.5mm ID ring, and we're going to feed on all 5 of our 2-2 chains as we did before. So just pop them all onto the opened ring, feeding it through 1 pair of the rings on each chain, close that ring up, okay, and feed through a second 8.5mm ring through all your little pieces of chain, making sure you pick all of them up so that we've got 5 sets of rings on each of our middle rings. Okay, this is a high aspect ratio ring, this one in the middle, so it can be a little tricky to get a nice join, but just keep wiggling it until you get it to join up nice. Okay, so exactly the same as before, we now want to create half Byzantine units out of each of these chain pieces. So separate out a pair of rings and then flop the end pair of rings on each side, folding them all the way back so that they sit up against your middle ring. Separate out the rings on top to expose the ones underneath, and slip through your opened ring through that pair of rings that you exposed. And of course, because we've put 1 ring in there, we want to place another ring. Okay, and we just do that same thing again all the way around our work until we've converted all our chain units to our half Byzantine units. So I'm just going to whip around and do that. So this is no different than what you've done for the Byzantine square or the Byzantine diamond, whichever way you're aligning your work. Okay, just popping that through. And remembering to put a pair of rings in. We always work in pairs in this design. Okay, so that's 3 done. And 4. Nearly there. Okay, and one last one to do. So fold the top rings back. Okay, expose those rings there underneath, and with another opened ring, scoop up those rings, close it up, and repeat with a second ring. Okay, so there we've got our 5 half Byzantine units all in place, and now we want to go around and start joining those units up like we did before. So taking another opened ring, going to our first half unit, taking up 2 of those rings, so 1, 2 from our first unit and 1, 2 from our second unit. Close that up. Move on to our next unit. So going down through the last remaining rings on the unit that we just joined, one of the units we just joined, and on picking up 1, 2 rings from the next unit in line. So once you've got those 3 joining rings in place, I suggest going through and doubling those up now. It just tightens the weave up a little bit, helps with the next step, but doesn't tighten it up so much that it becomes unusable. So just go through and double those rings up. Okay. And then what we need to do now is grab our Rivoli, and we want to try and put that, or we're going to put that into the middle of our star here. Now this is really fiddly, I'm not going to lie. It might take you a little while to get it. But what we want to do is we want to sort of slip our Rivoli in so that it sits underneath all these rings here that are from the Byzantine that are on top of our middle rings. We need to try and keep this flat. It will have a tendency to try and slip sideways because we wanted to sit it between all of our rings. Okay, so we've got that sort of in place there. Okay, it is slippery. Oh, look at that, slipped out of place. This will take a lot of patience, but it's worth persevering. So there, we've got that in place now. So very carefully, keeping a good squeeze on that, we're going to finish joining our half Byzantine units together. Okay, do this gently. You don't want to jog and swing this around because you don't want this Rivoli to move out of place, because as you saw, it's very slippery and it can slip out of place very easily. Okay, so we've got 1 ring placed, and we're now going to finish closing our Byzantine units all together. Alright. Taking it nice and slowly. Alright, so we've got those Rivoli in place. And we just now need to go through and finish doubling up those rings that we just put in. Oops. So 1 and the other one. Oops, wrong spot. Okay. This last ring is a little tight. Open that up a little bit. Oh, sorry about that. As you can see, it is very tight. You do have to take a little bit of care getting your last doubled ring in there. Okay, come at it whatever way you have to get it in there. All right. So that's your star piece made. So you can see that Rivoli is sitting underneath all the rings on this side of the Byzantine unit, and again underneath all the rings on there. It does sit up a little bit at the front, that's to be expected, that's not a problem. Alright, so once you've got your unit made, and as I said, and as you saw, it is going to be fiddly, so do take your time with it, don't mar your rings. We want to then take our bracelet that we've been constructing, and we want to attach that like there, as we attach the other ones. So again, taking up some opened rings, feed it through the last square unit there in the middle, one of the rings there and feed it through one of the points of your star. Double that ring up. So we want all our rings to be doubled. Okay. And then just join your second point to the star. One more ring. So this is what we're looking at now. So now what we want to do is we want to add the chain to our point here on our star. Now, as I said, this will be quite personal. So you'll need to put it on your wrist and then, you know, gauge how much chain you want to go down and around your finger and back up again. So I'm just going to take this chain here, and you may need to adjust it, so you know, don't get too worried about it being exact the first time through. And I'm going to take off, I think maybe about 12 centimeters. Okay, is that about 12 centimeters? Now the chain I'm using is unwelded, so you can just undo the link. Oh, that wasn't clever, was it? Okay, try that again. About 12 centimeters. Okay, find the join and undo the link. You may have to cut your chain if your chain is welded, but you just, when you're choosing a chain, just make sure that the ID of the chain is big enough to take the joining ring. So I'm using our 16 gauge rings, our 1.2 millimeter wire diameter rings, and this particular chain has, I think it's a 3 millimeter internal diameter. So it's big enough for my ring to go through. So you can use the 4.25 mil that you've got, or you could go a little bit smaller depending on what you've got on hand. I like to go a little bit smaller, but I'm just going to use the 4.25. So we just want to put both ends of our chain onto the ring like that, and then we take our bracelet and feed that through the last point. Okay, so it looks like that. So as I said, just play with that length of chain, see what suits your hand, and make it the length that you need it to be. All right, so once you've got that done, all we now need to do is attach our clasp. Any 2-ring clasp will work, but I think for this, given that it's a, you know, what you would call a slave bracelet or a hand flower, if you prefer that term, I find the slide lock clasp is a much better fit. Okay, so again, taking up your 4.25 millimeter rings, open up one of those, feed it through one end on your bracelet piece, feed it through one end of those, you know, in one corner there, and pop on your slide lock clasp. Okay, do that for the other corner. Okay. And then making sure that we haven't twisted the bracelet at all, attach the other end to your clasp as well. One and one more. Okay, so that's your clasp attachment, and that is your finished slave to Byzantine hand flower or slave bracelet, whatever you like to call it. I'm going to call it my slave to Byzantine bracelet. I really hope you enjoyed our tutorial today and you had fun making the bracelet with me. If you did enjoy our tutorial, don't forget to give us a thumbs up here at YouTube or comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. Every little bit of interaction we have with you guys here on YouTube, it really does help us, and it enables us in the long run to continue doing these video tutorials for you. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you, so pop them in the comment section below the video. Also below the video is the description tab, which we have the link to our online store where you can go and buy all the components and tools that we use today to create our tutorial. There's also links there to our online social media, so if you want to share what you've done with us, you know, tag us on Instagram or pop an image up on our Facebook wall. We'd really love to catch up with you guys and see what you're doing. Alright, as I said, I really hope you did enjoy this video today. The basic units of this not only make a fantastic bracelet, but you can also make earrings or pendants. The little star looks lovely on a chain just by itself as a pendant. So there's a few things you can do with this video today, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and we will catch up with you again sometime in the future. Alright, bye.